And so it ends. Computex 2016 is over and we're soon leaving Taipei for home. With that, we're gonna bring us a lot of memories, cool products, and especially shitloads of graphics cards, excuse my language. We've seen a lot of cards from NVIDIA, of course, GTX 1080 and 1070. AMD has also actually shown us their Polaris 10 GPU and the Radeon RX 480. The big question is, what is this card gonna give us? What can we expect? We have been running around here during the show, talking to partners, manufacturers, pulling all the strings we humanly could to get all the information possible before the launch on the 29th of June. And this is more or less a summation of the rumors and information we've gathered here at the show. So enjoy and look forward to the new Radeon RX 480.
Nordic Hardware och prisjaktsbevakning från Computex 2016 presenteras i samarbete med NetOnNet och Corsair.
So AMD finally announced their new Radeon RX 480 graphics card. They announced the new Polaris 10 GPU-based graphics card at Computex, and we now know that they will range from $199 up to $249 depending on the GPU memory equipped on the card. So it's going to be 4 GB or 8 GB. We now know that the specs we've seen before in leaks are pretty much on spot. It's 150 TDP, 2304 streaming processors, and of course the 14 nanometer manufactured Polaris 10 GPU. Even though we now have some more detailed specifications that are actually set in stone by AMD themselves, there are quite a few question marks still to be straightened out. We've been gathering information during Computex from partners and manufacturers, and the general feeling is a mix of well, happiness and confusion and frustration. Most partners had actually expected a bit higher price, $250 to $300. And when the $199 to $249 pricing was revealed, it was both good news and bad news. The good news is that, well, the cards will be cheaper for consumers to buy and therefore the market share should increase. The bad news is that they planned the card for a bit higher price, and specifically the 4 GB versions for $199 seems to be hard to hit with proper margins for the manufacturers, and some that we spoke with mentioned that they would probably not hit $199 with their own 4 GB cards, probably more like $210, $220 in order to get in those extra goodies on the circuit boards and stuff that they had planned for also the 4 GB cards. The 8 GB card for $249 should be quite doable, so probably we'll see that $50 gap shrink a bit to maybe $30 difference between the 4 and 8 GB cards, which also makes more sense looking at the pricing on GDDR5 memory. If we look at the specifications that we actually haven't received yet, it's mostly about clock speeds and final performance. The cards that we've seen before in leaks and that we saw ourselves behind closed doors, we weren't allowed to film or for that matter take any pictures. These cards were running 1266 MHz on the GPU according to AMD's Crimson drivers. That might mean everything or nothing, to be honest. They can just be placeholders for the final clocks, but it looks like AMD is stepping up the clock frequencies for the new Polaris 10 GPU compared to, for example, Fiji and Hawaii from the previous generations. At the same time, we talked to partners and manufacturers that had tried to do some overclocking on these cards, and it didn't really pan out at the moment. AMD has apparently sent out reference boards and cards to them that doesn't really allow overclocking, so it has been really hard to see what kind of clock frequencies we can expect from these new GPUs. One thing that we should keep in mind though is that the graphics core next architecture isn't designed to hit those kind of 2 GHz or more frequencies as the Kepler and especially Pascal architecture is manufactured for. So probably not kind of clock speeds, but yeah, a couple more 100 MHz on the GPUs is something that we really are expecting. Looking at the new Radeon RX 480 physically, we've already seen the reference card shown off by AMD themselves. The design is using a pretty short circuit board with the classical blower cooler that extends outside of the circuit board, and that is something we'll see probably on a few partner cards as well, definitely on lower models that we will come to a bit later in this video. But we will also see bigger graphics cards from partners. We actually saw one partner showing off their first RX 480 card. It was using a longer PCB, bigger cooler with 2 big fans. And we're gonna see some different kind of designs from all the manufacturers around. But with a 150 TDP, it would be possible to make really small cards with the Polaris 10 GPU, even the RX 480, and still hit really low sound levels and low temperatures. We've been really trying to nail down the performance estimates of the new RX 480, and even though AMD actually showed off some numbers with crossfire setup compared to the 1080, it's really hard to nail that down. Even the partners do not really know, or at least they're not telling. The numbers we've heard is the same as before, performance levels around the R9 390 and the R9 390X, so somewhere there in between. Maybe more upwards the 390X, but we will probably have a hard time beating that older card, even though that card is running at a much higher TDP and a higher price. When we look at the launching schedule from AMD, we also have 2 different SKUs besides the RX 480 that's up and coming. We have the RX 470. That card will actually be performing around the R9 390 and will have a TDP of 110 to 130 watts. It doesn't really say anything more about specifications of this card, but yeah, a cut down version of the RX 480. AMD is also working on the RX 460, so even an even lower priced card that would be launched in the end of July, and we don't have any numbers really on this card, more than it's actually coming. And both the RX 470 and RX 460 we can expect to arrive in really slim form factors from a lot of partners. From what we hear, Nvidia has plans to counter AMD in the mainstream and lower performance segment. They're pushing hard to get their GTX 1060 ready. The problem is that the GP106 GPU is far from ready, and the GP104 will be costly to sell in this price range, even though they cut down on the number of CUDA cores and stuff. So we're probably going to be looking at one GTX 1060 based on the GP104 GPU. That would be pretty expensive for Nvidia to manufacture and sell at the prices that they need to hit to counter AMD, while they're working on their real 1060 with the GP106 GPU. At the same time, AMD is letting Nvidia have a field day in the performance and enthusiast segment with their 1070 and 1080 graphics cards. So AMD focusing on mainstream performance and Nvidia focusing on the performance and enthusiast segment. So this is a summation of what we know so far. A lot can happen, and we have a couple of weeks before the real launch on the 29th of June. So stay tuned and we'll get back to you with more information as we get it. Take care.
Vissa grafikkortstillverkare har bättre självförtroende än andra. Vi kommer in hit hos Galax, vill kika närmare på deras eftertraktade GTX 1080 Hoff Edition och frågar dem hur snabbt kommer det här vara? Snabbare än de andra.